A major military milestone for the US in Afghanistan. After 2 decades of war, most of the remaining troops are now on their way home. The United Nations Security Council meets today to discuss the humanitarian disaster in northern Ethiopia. We'll have a live report. And the last official visit to the UK for Germany's Chancellor, COVID travel restrictions top of the agenda. Hello, it's 10 a.m. here in Atlanta, 6 p.m. in Abu Dhabi. I'm Lynda Kinkade, sitting in for Becky Anderson. Good to have you with us and welcome to Connect the World. We begin with a big step, symbolically and otherwise, in the US withdrawal from Afghanistan. The last of America's troops have left Bagram Air Base months ahead of schedule. Bagram, near the capital Kabul, was the epicenter of the US war on terror against the Taliban and Al-Qaeda following the September 11 terror attacks. Well, now the US has turned Bagram Airport over to the Afghan military as the Taliban makes gains across the country. And with the US forces leaving early, what is next for Afghanistan? CNN's Anna Corrin spoke with Dr. Abdullah, the Afghan official in charge of talks with the Taliban. Take a listen.
Dr. Abdullah, how can you guarantee that Afghanistan will not be a safe haven for terrorists in the future?
I don't think that there is a guarantee. And there also Taliban have failed. They have promised that they will de-link with Al-Qaeda in other terrorist groups. We don't have many signs of that. So that's the danger for us as well as for the region and beyond.
A US intelligence report said the Afghan government could fall within 6 months once US troops withdraw. Do you see the Taliban one day toppling the Afghan government?
No, inshallah. That may be their thinking or thinking in parts of Taliban movement, but this will not happen.
You are obviously in charge of the peace talks between the Afghan government and the Taliban. You've said yourself that they've made no progress. What is the latest?
Very little progress, very slow pace. And look at the urgency of the situation. Look at what is going on in the country and the opportunities that we miss as a result of the continuation of the war.
What do you think the past 20 years, America's longest war, has achieved for Afghanistan?
Most part of Afghanistan was under the Taliban control. Al-Qaeda was freelancing. Osama bin Laden was planning Washington in New York from Afghanistan. That part, of course, some challenges remain. The situation of women in Afghanistan, freedoms, freedom of speech, awareness of the people about their rights. It's very different Afghanistan today.
We've been speaking to so many Afghans who now just want to leave the country with the deteriorating security situation. What is your message to these people who were perhaps the future of this country?
Our country, our people are going through very, very difficult times. The world has supported us and they will continue to support, but it's only us who can save it. Those who believe in military takeover, take responsibility for the continuation of the misery of the people, suffering of the people, and they will not have their ideas materialized.
CNN's Nic Robertson knows Afghanistan very well. He's been covering the country for more than 2 decades, even before the September 11 attacks and the US invasion. Nic joins us now from London for more on these historic developments. And Nic, Bagram Airport, of course, was once this bustling mini city, if you like, which saw over 100,000 US troops come through its gates. It's seen the last of the US troops leave. This is a huge moment for the US ending its war there.
It's a very symbolic moment. You know, the Bagram military air base before September the 11th was actually at one point part of a front line between the Northern Alliance, who were the last holdouts in Afghanistan, fighting against the Taliban. It was a desolate place that was dangerous to be in, and it became, of course, a real hub of US influence in the country. And that was what the Afghan government really took from the United States after September the 11th, that here they'd found a partner and an ally for generations to come, in the same way that sort of South Korea and Japan had been long-term partners of the United States since, pretty much since World War II. So the Afghan government had these strong security and political connections with the United States, and they thought that those would endure. But when the base of Bagram, that was, as you said, mini city, if you try to run around that base, the perimeter, it would take you over an hour, where there were prison facilities, the special forces used to operate out of there. The flight line would be so busy back in the day you could barely get to sleep in the tents that were along the side of the flight line. The very fact that hope of an enduring relationship, which really Afghans were hoping would really lift the country over generations. The emptying and the clearing out and the handover of Bagram today really epitomizes the end of that era, and a morale-sapping moment for the Afghan forces, who now lack that NATO and US air power in airstrikes that they've become so used to having and depending on in many cases to fight the Taliban.
And Nic, just talk to us about the concerns for the Afghans left behind, particularly those who helped the US and its allies in the war there.
Yeah, it's a real sense of exposure. The Taliban in the past have killed people that they accuse of being spies, those who have worked with foreign forces, those who have worked for the Afghan government, accusing the Afghan government of being a puppet of foreign forces and foreign powers. So Afghans who've worked with US forces and other international groups justifiably feel afraid. They cannot count on the fact that the Taliban will do what they're doing with some of the Afghan National Army at the moment, which is getting the Afghan National Army to surrender and then sending them home and giving them a small payment before they send them home. These people who've put their faith in the United States and other NATO nations cannot count on having that largesse from the Taliban. And so if the Taliban arrive at their town or village or city even, although that's not the case right now, then they know that their lives and the lives of their families could be in danger. It's a justifiable fear. So it's reasonable that many of them would want to leave and are seeking to leave.
Yeah, it certainly is reasonable. Our Nic Robertson for us, diplomatic editor from London. Good to have you with us. Thank you. We are going to stay on this story. Our next guest says there isn't a lot of appetite these days for sending US troops into areas like Afghanistan and Iraq in large numbers. John Negroponte became the US ambassador to the United Nations in the days after the September 11 attacks. Later, as Deputy Secretary of State, he talked with Afghan leaders about the country's reconstruction. Ambassador Negroponte joins us now live from Washington. Good to have you with us.
Good morning.
So you served under the George W. Bush administration as this war in Afghanistan began. Just for our viewers, I just want to play some sound of the former US president talking at the time when the first US airstrikes began.
On my orders, the United States military has begun strikes against al-Qaeda terrorist training camps and military installations of the Taliban regime in Afghanistan.
He went on to say that we will win this conflict by the patient accumulation of successes. I want to ask you, Ambassador, where did the US succeed? Where did the US fail?
Well, first of all, that was the very day when Mr. Bush was speaking there in that recording that I was instructed to inform the Security Council of the United Nations that we were going into Afghanistan in self-defense because of the 9/11 attacks under Article 51 of the United Nations Charter. And I think that act of self-defense on our part was widely accepted by the international community. Where we succeeded, of course, in overthrowing the Taliban government in Afghanistan and began the process of helping to build a successor government. I think where we perhaps did not succeed as well, obviously, is that this became sort of an endless proposition, and we never got to the point where we could say that our political and military objectives had been finally accomplished. So in between overthrowing the Taliban successfully and then finding some kind of satisfactory endpoint, we never seemed to be able to get there.
That is certainly the case, and it certainly was the case in the lead up to this decision by US President Biden in withdrawing US troops. When you look at the cost of America's war in Afghanistan, it's humongous, over $2.2 trillion. That's according to the Brown University cost of war. And then, of course, it's the cost of lives, over 212,000 people, including over 2,000 US military members. After 20 years of war there, what state has Afghanistan been left in?
Well, I think this is a very dangerous moment for Afghanistan because we don't know what's going to happen next. There obviously is a sense of insecurity in Afghanistan at the moment as a result of our departure, and I think there are a variety of potential risks to include serious defeats by the Afghan military and or a sort of reversion to kind of a warlordism where different ethnicities and different militias retreat to their strongholds, and Afghanistan maybe moves back towards resembling the terrible situation it faced in the 1990s.
So you think we could clearly see just a reversal to what existed before the US moved in, after all that cost, all that investment, all that time spent in the country? You think we could see pretty much what was happening before the US went in?
Well, I think either a gradual reversal or possibly even a precipitate one, but some of that will it'll be sort of a test for the training and equipping that we've done for the Afghan security forces and the investment we've made in helping them stand up a government to see if they can withstand some of these pressures. Mr. Abdullah sounded reasonably confident that the country would be able to withstand these pressures, albeit with difficulty. And I wish him the very best in that. And I also think the United States government has an obligation to continue to provide support to Afghanistan. I think it's a pity we're withdrawing completely, because when you speak about costs and the large costs that indeed have been incurred over the past 20 years, it would not have been very costly or will not be very costly to maintain some kind of residual involvement and presence in Afghanistan. We had reduced the costs for our own selves to manageable, sustainable, both politically and economically levels. And it's a pity that we decided to withdraw entirely. I regret that.
Some analysts say the Afghan government could fall within 6 months of the US leaving, and that analysis is coming from US intelligence. What are your fears? How bad could things get?
Well, boy, I tell you, if I was once director of national intelligence, if I had a report like that, I don't think I would have released it to the public. I think it's very unfortunate that that happened. It's obviously somewhat speculative in nature, and I hope that its psychological effects are not too damaging. But let's face it, we've left them with quite a bit of equipment and training. We're going to have air support, albeit not from Bagram airfield, but offshore, from a distance, from bases in the Middle East and aircraft carriers. Maybe that will be helpful. What I would have liked is if we could have kept 2 or 3 or even 10,000 troops there just to provide various kinds of enabling support, whether it was intelligence or logistics. And frankly, I do not think it would have been that costly to do that, nor do I think it would have been particularly risky to our people. I don't think we would have lost, that we would have had many casualties as a result. So in that sense, I think that the administration's action is precipitate and I think somewhat ill-advised.
I mean, the challenge is that, as you have clearly pointed out, when do you end this war? It's already been 20 years. If nothing's changed, at what point do you say you withdraw?
Well, you can ask another question, though. You can say, well, how long should a presence, a military and political presence, be in a country? You know, in Japan, we've been there since the end of World War II. In Germany, we've been there since the end of World War II. So there's nothing magic about any particular kind of number. The important thing for us, for the American public, I think, and our citizenry, was to reduce the costs, both in blood and in treasure, to some kind of a sustainable level. And I think we had reached that point. So for that reason, I'm not sure I know what the rush was.
Right now, the Taliban is making gains in Afghanistan. Is there any leverage right now to discuss some sort of peace with the Taliban? And why would they cooperate?
Well, the leverage we have is substantially reduced once you've withdrawn all of your forces. But it would be good if they and the Kabul government could hold talks. Maybe that'll be a possibility if the Taliban has a change of heart. But you know, can the leopard change its stripes? And I'm not entirely certain it can do that.
All right, looks like we're losing the light there. Ambassador Negroponte, really good to have you on the program to get your perspective. Thanks so much.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. Okay.
Not a problem.
Thank you.
Good to talk to you.